Hi, I'm John Sabol, and I'm here to present the history of Slovaks in Cleveland, Ohio. For anyone doing research about Slovak ancestors in Cleveland, it's important to know these facts to give you some historical context about your ancestors. It's said that the first Slovak in Cleveland was Jakub Grus, who arrived in 1880. But even he disputes that, saying it was actually a fellow named Jan Roskos. Although many Slovaks gravitated to coal mines in Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Southeast Ohio, others, who preferred to stay above ground, emigrated to Cleveland. The following slides, based on U.S. Census information, show the growth and changing identity of the Slovak population from 1870 to 1930. A look at census figures going back to 1870, 10 years before the first Slovak, Jakub Grus, is said to have arrived here, gives you a good idea about the presence of Slovaks in Cuyahoga County. By 1880, the year Grus arrived, we could see 581 people who were born in Hungary. Some of these undoubtedly were Slovaks, but Hungary was where they were from. By 1900, we see almost 10,000 from Hungary and a handful from Austria-Hungary, which reflects the dual monarchy. We can see a huge increase in the Hungarian count in 1910, but I can assure you that many of these were Slovak. And by 1920, we see continued increase in Hungarians, but with the establishment of Czechoslovakia, Slovaks are establishing their own identity. My favorite is still Slovak Land, which I regard as some sort of early amusement park, but maybe not. And by 1930, the Hungarian number takes a huge drop as Slovaks are coming into their own as a separate ethnic group. Granted, by 1930, the figure for Czechoslovakia includes Czechs, but look at the number for those who say they were born in Hungary, way down. The 2010 U.S. Census is even more revealing about the character and presence of Slovaks in Cleveland. In 2010, in Northeast Ohio, Slovaks rank number 7 of ethnic groups tracked in the U.S. Census, with almost 66,500 claiming Slovak ancestry. The 2000 census showed a median household income of $52,349 among Slovaks and an 84% rate of home ownership. That statistic says a lot about the perseverance of Slovaks generally, and especially about the perseverance of some of our ancestors. We often see photographs of immigrants getting off the boat at Ellis Island, and they're loaded with luggage and who knows what else. But there were 3 important things that they brought with them. And those 3 are language, religion, and family. This presentation, and hopefully your research, is about what our ancestors did to preserve the 3 most important things they brought with them. Unlike the Czechs, who moved as a group from one Cleveland area to another and established new housing, Slovaks settled in Cleveland according to where the jobs were, and they established churches to reflect their presence in the neighborhood and to practice their religion in the language that they knew from birth. This is important to know because church and other records will be based on the neighborhood where they lived. Also, it's important to note that because Slovaks settled in these little pockets throughout Greater Cleveland, there's a good chance that they were from the same village or district, or the next door neighbors were speaking the same dialect, or they were relatives. And most of the early Slovak immigrants, those arriving before 1924, were from Eastern Slovakia. Here's a roundup of the founding dates of Cleveland Slovak churches, mainly Roman Catholic and Lutheran. This first map, we show St. Ladislaus, the first Slovak Catholic church in Cleveland, which was founded in 1885. By 1890 and 92, we see the founding of St. Martin in 1892, that's Catholic Church, and Holy Trinity Slovak Lutheran in 1890. St. Martin closed in 1960, and St. Ladislaus closed in 1971. By 1901 and 1903, we see huge growth in Cleveland's Slovak population. St. Wendelin is established in 1903 on the west side. St. Peter and Paul Evangelical Lutheran in 1901, and St. Cyril and Methodius Church in Lakewood, which we'll talk about in a little while. Also in 1903, we see the establishment of Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary on Cleveland's southeast side. Continuing on, in 1906, we see the establishment of St. Andrew Parish in 1906 on Cleveland's near what they call the Neartown area. It's near the downtown area of Cleveland. And then Our Lady of Mercy, which was founded first in 1917 and then again in 1926. And that's another story which we don't have time to go into today. Also in 1910, we see the founding of Dr. Martin Luther Evangelical Lutheran on the west side of Cleveland in that year, 1910. All these churches, except for St. Wendelin, which was founded in 1903, have since been closed or they've moved to the suburbs. Dr. Martin Luther Evangelical Lutheran, I believe, has moved, and St. Peter and Paul Evangelical Lutheran, I think, is still in their location in Lakewood. But the rest of these, St. Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary, closed in 1972. Our Lady of Mercy closed in 2009. As I said, St. Ladislaus closed in 1971, and St. Martin closed in 1960. St. Andrew closed also around, I would say, 2003, I think. The last of these Slovak churches to open was St. Benedict, which opened, as you can see, in 1928, and they closed in 1993. Where did they live and work? This is important because you'll see how their place of employment was really established where these churches and their communities were built. This is the Jakob Grus family. Remember him? It's shown here with his family. He's shown here with his family at his home near St. Ladislaus Church, probably in the late 19th century. He was a founding member of the First Catholic Slovak Union, and his home was the site of the Society's first convention. This is an interesting picture and gives you a good indication of how Slovak families moved. This is a picture of the Andrew Ferenc family, who lived eventually near Nativity BVM Church on the southeast side of Cleveland. This gentleman here is Andrew Ferenc Sr., who was born in Košická Bela, Slovakia, near Košice, and he emigrated here in 1911. His son Andrew and his wife Mary emigrated in 1920. The reason for the big separation was, of course, World War I. Over to the right of Andrew Ferenc, we see his sister, plus some uncles and aunts, also from Košická Bela. This composite photograph originally was in color, and it actually consists of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different photographs that Andrew Ferenc had put together and taken to a professional photographer or artist and had them assembled into one big picture. It's important to note that a lot of Slovak men came alone, lived in boarding houses until they had enough money to A, send for their families, and B, purchase a home on their own account. That's really important. It was family and home ownership were very important. A certain number of them were birds of passage and did go back to Slovakia after they had made their nest egg in Cleveland or other cities in the United States, but the great majority of them did stay in this country. This is a photograph of Sophia Avenue near St. Ladislaus Church in Cleveland. You can see the hill going up to Woodhill Avenue, and it gives you a good idea of the living conditions for the Slovak community at that time. This is the Tatra Savings and Loan at Woodhill and Sophia. It's at the top of the hill in the previous picture. And this bank was founded in 1909 by John Sotek, a Slovak. And it moved to this location at the top of the hill, overlooking the St. Ladislaus neighborhood in 1924, and later changed its name to State Savings and moved its main office to South Euclid. It was later sold to the First Nationwide Bank of San Francisco. This 1912 map shows an area near Nativity BVM Parish. Notice the streets on the right, which contain houses and residents, and to the left you have the Newburgh Works of American Steel and Wire Company on the left. This gives you a good indication of how close the early Slovaks lived to their jobs. Remember, a low percentage owned cars, and when they went to find a job, employers were suspicious of their national origin because they never heard of a Slovak, much less Slovakia. But they lived near the plant, and in some cases, especially in this area here, were boarding houses where Slovak men would live singly until they had enough money to bring their families over. Then they would buy a house on the other side of the street here and establish residence with their families and became longtime members of the community. This is the Newburgh Works of American Steel and Wire, which was shown on the map on the previous slide. Notice on the left, the laundry drying on the clothesline. That's how close everything was. These were the neighborhoods that people lived in at the time. They were in the shadow of their factories. Slovaks living in the area near St. Ladislaus may have worked for a place called Cleveland Malleable Castings, or the Eberhard Manufacturing Company, or the Van Dorn Company. But a close examination of other Slovak neighborhoods will show you the same relationship between where they lived and where they worked, except for maybe the Slovaks at Lakewood. That's an exception we're going to talk about right now. This is the Birdtown area of Lakewood, Ohio, and the United Carbon, later Union Carbide, and now Graftech plant. The plant was built in 1892 and immediately began to attract a large number of Slovak immigrants who commuted by trolley as much as 11 miles to get to work. The company owned land to the west of the plant and sold it to workers at cheap prices. Many of the streets had bird names such as Robin, Thrush, etc. So the area became known as Birdtown, or the Bird's Nest, a name by which it is still known today. Also, businesses also included much smaller enterprises also owned by Slovaks. These are two businesses that were near Nativity BVM Church on the east side of Cleveland. It wasn't long before Slovaks in Cleveland and elsewhere formed societies to preserve their language and religion and to protect their families in the face of tragedy. Most of these societies were mutual aid and insurance-based and include two founded in Cleveland and which survive to the present day, even though they've now become quite nationally known among Slovaks. This is the founding convention of the First Catholic Slovak Union, which took place in Cleveland in 1890. The society was formed to help members deepen their religious faith and become U.S. citizens. They also established an insurance fund, a weekly newspaper, the Jednota, and as a cultural organization, protected the Slovak language and heritage. Its home office, originally near East 55th and Broadway in Cleveland, has since moved to Rockside Road in Independence, nearby in Cleveland. The people in this photo include Jakub Grus. Remember him? In 1892, Anna Hurban, a Slovak immigrant from Gabeli in Nitra County, founded the first Catholic Slovak Ladies Association for the same reason the first Catholic Slovak Union was established. And mainly to protect widows, women who became widows because their husbands worked in coal mines and were subject to a lot of disasters there, or worked in the steel mills and would be killed in industrial accidents. She founded, along with the urging of Father Stefan Furdek, who is considered the father of American Slovaks, she founded the first Catholic Slovak Ladies Association. She felt that women and children needed the same protection as men. And for many years, the Society's headquarters were in Shaker Heights, near Cleveland, and they have since moved to Beechwood. Again, another nationally known Slovak fraternal. These are the cadet corps of the first Catholic Slovak Ladies Association, parading at Cleveland Stadium in 1934 as part of the triennial convention of the first Catholic Slovak Union. You can gather the size of the organization that had become by 1934. Many people ask why there's no Slovak Hall in Cleveland. Well, there was, but because of the many Slovak neighborhoods in Cleveland, it became difficult to focus on one central location. But they did try, and this is the groundbreaking for the Slovak National Home, built in 1906 at 8804 Buckeye Road near St. Ladislaus. It closed several years later, but the building still stands at the corner of Buckeye Road and the Opportunity Corridor, for those of you in Cleveland who might want to go and look at that building. The National Carbon Company, later Union Carbide, conducted citizenship classes for its Slovak workers and encouraged them to get U.S. citizenship as soon as possible. At the same time, many churches conducted classes for newly arrived immigrants. And this is the scene at Gray's Armour in Cleveland in May 26, 1907, when the Slovak League of America was founded. The crowd, estimated at about 7,000, included Slovaks and Carpatho-Rusyns. The Slovak League of America was the prime mover behind the Cleveland Agreement, issued in October 2015, and the predecessor of the Pittsburgh Pact, which in the Cleveland Agreement produced a pledge of equality of Czechs and Slovaks in any new state to be created at the end of World War I. Finally, Slovak legionnaires, 360 Slovaks and Czechs from Cleveland, volunteered to fight even before U.S. involvement in World War I. They were determined to take part in the battle against Austria-Hungary, an empire they regarded as their oppressor. Cleveland Slovaks donated more than $10,000 to their cause. Thanks for your time today, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to address them.